There comes a moment in every life when you must look directly into the mirror of your own soul, not to admire, but to recognize. You begin to see the patterns, the same pain wearing different faces, the same fears dressed in new circumstances, and in that moment of awareness, something ancient inside you whispers, "The cycle ends with you." This is not a declaration of pride. It is a vow of transformation, the kind that demands honesty, courage, and the willingness to meet your shadow. You are not here merely to suffer what your ancestors suffered. You are here to awaken where they fell asleep. Every unconscious cycle feeds on blindness. We cannot heal what we cannot see. So long as the pattern remains hidden, it moves through your life like an invisible current, pulling you toward the same experiences, the same disappointments, the same wounds that once belonged to those before you. What you call fate is often just the repetition of the unexamined. Awareness is the beginning of liberation. It is not a single moment of clarity but a gradual awakening, where your inner vision begins to sharpen, and what was once normal now feels heavy and outdated. You start noticing the tone of voice that sounds like your father's anger, the silence that echoes your mother's sadness, the fear that doesn't belong to this moment but to a past long buried. In that noticing, you begin to understand that life is not punishing you. It is showing you where you are still asleep. The people who trigger you are mirrors reflecting the parts of yourself you've refused to confront. The situations that repeat themselves are messages from the unconscious, asking to be acknowledged, not avoided. Awareness demands honesty, the kind of honesty that strips away your defenses and excuses. It asks you to look at your pain not as a victim but as a witness, to trace the thread of your reactions back to their root. This is where real courage begins, the willingness to look directly at what hurts without turning away. As your awareness deepens, something remarkable happens. The energy that was once trapped in unconscious repetition becomes available for creation. The moment you truly see the pattern, it loses its power to control you. The loop begins to dissolve, and you start to act, not out of inherited pain, but from conscious choice. Awareness is light entering the dark room of your psyche. It does not erase the shadows. It reveals their outlines, allowing you to understand them. And once you see clearly, you can no longer live the same way. That is how transformation begins, not through struggle, but through seeing. The shadow is the part of you that you were taught to hide. The anger you were told was dangerous. The sadness you were told was weakness. The desire you were told was shameful. It is everything you rejected in order to belong, to be loved, to survive. Over time, these dissound fragments sink into the depths of the unconscious, but they never disappear. They wait, patient and powerful, for the moment when you are ready to remember them. You cannot end a cycle without meeting what was denied. What you repress in yourself does not die, it disguises itself. It shows up as the people who irritate you, the emotions you cannot explain, the sudden waves of fear or judgment that take you by surprise. The shadow does not come to destroy you, it comes to make you whole. It holds the very energy that, once integrated, becomes your authenticity, your creativity, your strength. To meet the shadow is to enter the wilderness of your own psyche, a place both frightening and sacred. It asks for radical honesty. It asks you to confront the sides of yourself that you have labeled unacceptable. But when you approach the shadow not with fear, but with curiosity, it begins to soften. You realize that your anger was protecting your boundaries. Your sadness was a call for compassion. Your jealousy was pointing to your unfulfilled potential. Every emotion you've buried carries intelligence. Every dark corner hides a piece of your lost light. The process of integrating the shadow is not comfortable. It feels like death, because the old identity, the false self that survived through denial, begins to dissolve. But beyond that death lies freedom. You stop living through masks and begin to live as your whole self. The energy that was once trapped in repression becomes creative fire. When you embrace your shadow, you also stop projecting it onto others. You no longer need to make enemies out of those who mirror your denied parts. Instead, you see in them a reflection of your own unconscious, and from that recognition arises compassion, for yourself, for others, for the human condition itself. To meet the shadow is to reclaim your soul. It is to gather every part of you that was exiled and bring it home. Only then can you stand fully in your power, not as someone perfect or pure, but as someone whole. The shadow, once feared, becomes your deepest ally, guiding you to live with depth, authenticity, and truth. It is easy to say, "This is just who I am," or "This is how life has always been." But such statements are not truths. They are defense mechanisms of the unconscious. They are ways to protect the familiar pain that has shaped us. Yet true responsibility begins the moment you stop explaining your patterns and start transforming them. Responsibility is not about blame, it is about awareness in action. It means recognizing that while you did not choose the wounds you inherited, you now have the power to decide what you will pass on. To choose consciousness is to step out of the trance of repetition. It is to interrupt the automatic reactions that once controlled you, the defensiveness, the anger, the withdrawal, the self-sabotage. These habits may have protected you once, but they no longer serve who you are becoming. Choosing consciousness means pausing long enough to ask, what part of me is speaking right now? My fear or my wisdom? My pain or my truth? Each moment of awareness is an opportunity to choose differently. Responsibility requires humility, the willingness to see how you've contributed to your own suffering. It takes courage to admit that the pain you blame on others might also be a mirror of your own unresolved patterns. Yet this humility is the gateway to freedom, because when you claim your part, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for others to change, and you begin the sacred work of transformation within. It is tempting to cling to the identity of the wounded one, to say, "I act this way because of my past." But the past is not a life sentence, it is a lesson. When you take responsibility, you stop carrying the weight of generations unconsciously. You start to realize that you are not only the result of what has been, you are also the beginning of what can be. Every conscious act you take, forgiving instead of resenting, speaking truth instead of hiding, choosing peace instead of control, sends a new vibration through your lineage. This is the real meaning of breaking the cycle. It does not happen in a single dramatic moment, but through thousands of small awakenings, where you choose awareness over reaction, presence over projection. Each choice becomes a thread in the new pattern you are weaving. Responsibility is the highest form of power because it aligns you with creation itself. You are no longer a passive recipient of fate. You become a conscious participant in the unfolding of your soul. You begin to live from your center, guided not by fear or habit, but by a deep inner knowing. To choose consciousness is to say, the story may have begun with pain, but it will not end there. It will end with awareness, compassion, and freedom. Because I have chosen to awaken. The process of transformation begins the moment you stop running from your wounds and begin listening to them. Every wound carries a message, a lesson that life has been trying to teach you again and again. Most people spend their lives trying to escape pain, through distraction, achievement, or denial, but pain is not the enemy. Pain is a messenger of the soul, a signal that something within you is ready to evolve. The wound, if approached consciously, becomes the door to wisdom. When you allow yourself to face your suffering directly, something extraordinary happens. What once seemed unbearable begins to reveal its meaning. The betrayal that shattered you teaches you about trust, not the naive trust of the past, but a deeper trust in yourself. The loss that broke your heart teaches you about love, not attachment, but a love that transcends possession. The failure that humiliated you becomes your initiation into humility and authenticity. In this way, every wound, when faced with awareness, becomes sacred material for your evolution. Transformation does not come through force. You cannot fix or erase your pain. You can only transform it by integrating its wisdom. This means feeling it fully without letting it consume you, acknowledging what it taught you without clinging to its story. You begin to see that the very places where you felt powerless were also the places where your strength was being born. Like fire refining gold, pain burns away illusion and reveals what is essential. This alchemy of the soul demands patience. Transformation is not a single event but an unfolding, a slow ripening of consciousness. There will be moments when you feel as though you are falling apart, when the old self is crumbling and the new one has not yet formed. But even in that uncertainty, something inside you knows this disintegration is sacred. It is the death of the false self, making space for the truth of who you are. When you stop seeing your wounds as punishments and begin to honor them as teachers, you reclaim your creative power. The same energy that once kept you trapped in cycles of suffering becomes the energy that fuels your purpose. What you have endured gives you empathy. What you have overcome gives you clarity. What once made you feel broken now makes you a source of healing for others. To turn wounds into wisdom is to participate in the deepest kind of transformation, the one that unites opposites. You discover that your light was hidden inside your darkness all along. You realize that the pain you resisted was the very thing that shaped your depth, your compassion, your humanity. The wound becomes the womb of your rebirth. And as you transform, the world around you begins to change as well. Because every healed soul adds light to the collective field. Every person who turns their suffering into understanding becomes a living symbol of possibility. You become proof that pain is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of awakening. So, let your wounds speak. Let them teach. Let them transform. For through them, you will come to know the deepest truth of life, that everything which once hurt you was preparing you to become whole. Wholeness is not about becoming flawless. It is about becoming real. It is the state in which every part of you, both light and dark, conscious and unconscious, finally takes its rightful place within the unity of your being. Wholeness does not ask you to transcend your humanity, it invites you to inhabit it fully. To become whole is to embrace the contradictions within you, the strength and the vulnerability, the certainty and the confusion, the saint and the sinner, and to recognize that they all belong to the same sacred organism called you. When you reach toward wholeness, you are no longer trying to escape your past or sculpt yourself into an image that pleases the world. You begin to understand that healing was never about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you already are beneath the conditioning, the fear, and the inherited patterns. Wholeness arises when you stop dividing yourself into good and bad, worthy and unworthy, spiritual and human. It is the end of internal war, a quiet reconciliation of everything you once exiled from your heart. To become the new pattern means you stop reacting from the fragments of your lineage and start responding from awareness. You no longer carry forward the pain that was passed to you. You transform it. Every conscious act becomes a declaration. It ends with me, and it begins anew through me. You become the living bridge between what was and what can be. The anger that once destroyed now fuels your truth. The sorrow that once silenced you now deepens your compassion. The fear that once imprisoned you now sharpens your intuition. Wholeness is not a single moment of enlightenment, but an ongoing integration. It unfolds in the way you speak to yourself, the way you treat others, the way you meet life with openness instead of avoidance. It is the ability to remain centered even when life becomes chaotic, because you no longer fear your inner world. You have walked through your own darkness and discovered that nothing within you needs to be rejected, only understood. In wholeness, you become your own sanctuary. The outer world may still be unpredictable, but your inner world becomes stable, alive, and deeply connected to something greater. You no longer look to others to complete you because you have gathered all your lost pieces and brought them home. You begin to live not from reaction, but from presence, not from old stories, but from consciousness itself. And as you embody this new pattern, your very existence becomes medicine. Your calm steadiness ripples into the world around you. You no longer perpetuate the unconscious behaviors that once created conflict and pain. Instead, you radiate understanding, balance, and compassion. Your relationships evolve, your energy changes, and your presence begins to heal what words cannot. To become whole is to remember that you are not separate from life. You are life, unfolding, evolving, and expressing itself through awareness. You realize that the divine does not live somewhere far above, but within the totality of your experience, in your laughter, your grief, your joy, your longing. This is what it means to become the new pattern, to live as one who is both fully human and deeply aware. The The past no longer dictates your future because you have integrated its wisdom. You are no longer a repetition of the old story, you are the author of a new one. And that new story, one of presence, love, and consciousness, begins not when the world changes, but when you finally see that you have already become the change itself. So remember, the cycle ends with you. Not because you have escaped it, but because you have transmuted it into wisdom, love, and consciousness. This is the real alchemy of the soul, turning inherited pain into eternal purpose.